become a part of my life because of my father. He's from England, Dagenham boy, West Ham supporter, which was a bit odd, obviously, with the Millwall connection. But he's a massive, massive football fan. And being English, it's a natural progression within the family. So growing up as a kid, I used to wake up early hours of the morning and see flickerings of the TV. I used to hear the commentator shouting goal or something like that. And I used to creep down the hallway and could always see the Premier League on. They'd phoned a few scouts and they said they've got this young Aussie, you know, eager, ready to trial. And I just needed the opportunity. And when I had the phone call, you know, I'd been training down the park for hours and hours by myself, like literally just kicking a ball, running up and down from 18-yard box to 18-yard box because that was my run. I knew as a midfielder. I had to have a big engine, and I had the call and I ended up going to Millwall. I basically had that trial and I just left everything on the pitch for that 2 weeks, everything. It was just a whole new experience and something that I had to learn very quickly, that on the pitch, that I had to protect the ball and keep things simple and try and get integrated as soon as possible. But I felt the wrath of it very early, because going to Millwall, very physical, young Australian kid. Off the pitch, I was very quiet, you know, very reserved, very polite, always trying to do extra. But then on the pitch, I knew that I had to switch character very quickly so I could survive in that environment. Millwall made me. I am what I am today because of what I learned there. I learned my trade. You know, you talk about Keith Stevens, player that I played with. I learned very early on what a tackle was after going to a challenge with him and just to, you know, training. And I remember my reaction after he caught me to go directly back, and when given the opportunity with the ball, is to, you know, to also let him feel the same sort of character who I am on the pitch. So he knew also what he was dealing with, even though I was 17. He had a massive influence on my career, still someone till this day that I speak to regularly. That we spend a lot of time with. He lives in Australia, but the key was going there to a club that gave me the opportunity. And when you look at the players, Neil Harris and all these sorts of players that we had the best opportunity because the manager needed to play young kids, and we were also enthusiastic and we wanted to do well for the club. And in the end, we had some amazing times, but also just really enjoyed, you know, getting in the changing room, you know, and making sure we left everything on the pitch. It definitely gave us a taste for the big occasion playing at Wembley before they knocked it down. And we played against Wigan. And this was a team of boys, young, enthusiastic, committed, that were fearless. We were fearless. We knew every time that we went onto the pitch together that we could create something, we could make something special happen. Lo and behold, that game, you know, it was probably one step too far, unfortunately, even though we had the chance to win it. That, you know, you look back, it's an amazing memory for us as kids. You know, I look at pictures now and just think, I'm so blessed to have had that opportunity. But yeah, it's just one of those things that to have that opportunity so early, it helped me mature. Even though I was still so young, to be able to take that forward and then try and help the club do bigger things and look for bigger things. Promotion's really special, especially at Millwall, especially for the fans, especially for the financial situation the club was in, and also we always had to wheel and deal to sign players. We were always striving to keep our players. It was always just trying to hang on and stay to keep those players, to win promotion, to try and get to the next levels and to continue to do that. And unfortunately, in the past, we've lost players, and including myself. But it's massive to get promoted at that age, because it sets your level, it sets the bar of what you want as a player. It helps teach you the ingredients of what it needs within a changing room to be successful. I'll never forget that moment because it definitely helped, form part of who I am today. When we got to the championship, I knew that was my platform. After getting promoted, I knew that the levels were there. I'd waited so long for this opportunity, and I was more than happy to stay in the championship, and I was so excited for that season. And being a season where I got 10 plus goals, then being able to be more of a leader, more of someone that the team and the club could turn to or rely on was the responsibility that I really liked. And I like fighting against the odds of trying to get promoted again, because no one ever thought that we'd ever get close to having an opportunity to get promoted to the Premier League. But deep down inside my mind, I was like, well, why not? And I knew that I was ready, and I knew that I was going to be a goal-scoring midfielder because I had the fitness, I had the drive, but also I had the timing, which is the biggest key to anything. I think it was probably the hardest moment for me as a footballer, dealing with the first ever serious injury. But it was the best moment for me as a player. I realised very quickly who I was as an individual, and I was determined to get back as soon as possible. I basically, have 2 to 3 treatments a day. If they say to ice 3 times, I'll ice 6 times. I try and speed up recovery. I didn't understand the concept of getting treated once or twice a day when there's, effectively 10 hours in a day that you can actually do stuff. I didn't understand the concept of having a day off when you're injured. Like, what's a day off? So being around Mills is a great atmosphere, that you had like a really raw gym off the physio room. And throughout my injuries, even if you're on crutches or in a boot, you could still go do pull-ups and push-ups. You could go on a one-legged bike. What I'm trying to say is that it wasn't a job. It was the best feeling to be there every day, to have a training kit. It wasn't about the contract. It was about a training kit. It was about training twice a day. It was so much more about the journey and what it meant. So the injury was the best thing, because I was at my lowest point, but then once I come through it, I knew that what was on the other side, and that was to play again at the Den. Getting someone like Dennis Wise was good for players like myself. It was David Livermore, Stephen Reid, all these sorts of players, young. The reason why I say it's good is because he's won so much. The temperament that he had on the pitch and off the pitch, the club or Chelsea where he played at, and the influence that he had there. But then coming to Millwall, to be with us, to help us grow, to share his experience, it suited him so well. It suited us so well, because Ray Wilkins come as well. Dennis was very enthusiastic, very passionate, very emotional, whereas Ray Wilkins was very calm, very soothing, very holistic with his approach. And then when you put that together, it worked, and for me, to be playing beside him and watching and learning and seeing his movements and vision, and also scoring goals, it freed up a lot of space for me, but at the same time, give me the little bit of know-how on the levels of where I needed to get to, of understanding about keeping the ball more. And he was such a great passer, and he was so good for us on and off the park, that he had a big influence on a lot of the players at that time. To score at Sunderland at Old Trafford on that stage in that game was probably one of the biggest moments for me as a footballer at that time, because what it meant for the club, what it meant for the team, and we were there because we deserved to be, but then it was about just getting over that last hurdle. And I'll never forget the goal when Paul Eiffel cut in, had a shot, come back off the keeper. I've struck it, just try to keep it on target and keep, nice contact, and it hit the back of the net. And that's why you play football. Who knew if I was going to get that chance ever again as a player in a semi-final to take us to the finals of one of the biggest competitions. But I always looked back to that moment as a defining moment, because teams or players or clubs or fans always look to a player to make something happen, or to have that opportunity to create something special. And when I felt that, I was always trying to replicate it. I was always looking for that opportunity to do more in my career. I remember Ray Wilkins saying to take in this moment and to understand where you are, to the realisation of getting there, and to enjoy the experience. And I'll be honest with you, the final had already been played. It was at Sunderland. We knew we were massively up against it. We also knew that the mindset was to try and win. And when you look at the pairings of, who you're playing against and the teams, it was miles away. But at the same time, we had Dennis Wise and Ray Wilkins at the helm, and big characters within the change rooms that were motivating, that were, talking about what we could leave on that pitch, what we could leave for Millwall. And it was very special. It's hard to put into words because everything went so quick. I remember swapping jerseys, I think, with Ruud van Nistelrooy and looking at players like Roy Keane and thinking to myself, they're winners because of that, because of their application. You look at Ryan Giggs and the Nevilles and Rio Ferdinand and all these sorts of players, and you're just like, one day you're going to be there. You don't know what path you're going to take and how you're going to get there. But I just thought to myself, eventually I'll be playing against you guys more regularly. I think it's always difficult as a player, especially with the relationship I had with Millwall and the fans, to leave, because you want to do so much more for the club. And at that time, there wasn't any massive investment into buying more players to try and get promoted to the Premier League. And at that time, I was ready. In the times before, when I'd been approached, I'd always been a bit hesitant because I was like, I need the right club, I need the right environment for me. So when the time come to speak to clubs, Everton were there knocking, and I'll never forget it because I met David Moyes and Bill Kenwright, and it was probably the best thing I'd ever done because they had a player that just wanted to play, and then they wanted to sign me because of everything they'd seen, but still I reckon a little bit unsure with what they were going to get. But the only question I asked David Moyes when we're in the office is, are you going to give me my opportunity? And he looked at me and he went, well, we're signing your son. And I went, no, look, am I going to get the opportunity to play and start or to be involved? He says, yeah, you'll get your opportunity. And I looked at my agent at the time and I said, that's enough for me then. I said, I knew straight away. So it suited me perfect to go to Everton. Just before I'd signed there were question marks because the fans were like, Tim Cahill, proven, but, what type of player are we getting? Because it wasn't a massive transfer fee. I think what made it worse is Wayne Rooney leaving after I signed. But I was looking at the players, Duncan Ferguson, David Weir, Alan Stubbs, Lee Carsley, Tommy Gravison, Kevin Kilbane, these types of characters, players, men, men. When I played for Millwall, I played with men, like Stuart Nethercott and Kim Grant, Jimmy Carter. I was a young kid amongst men who all had families. So it was sort of like a similar changing room. The fans, very passionate, it's got history, it's got belief. I knew early on that I had to be aggressive. I had to be a leader. I had to work harder. I had to do extra. It was my second game, I think it was, and I'd scored. The Tony Hibbert cross, header back the same way it come from. Something that I'd done, in training my whole life and throughout my career already. And then celebrating after already receiving yellow card and putting my top over my head, I was in shock. I literally put it up, put it down, and I was so happy. It's my first ever goal, and it was just at the time then when they made a rule that if you put your shirt over your head, that you'd get caution. And it was the longest time of my life sitting on the bench, waiting for the whistle to blow, because it didn't hinder the game or the points, but I got ridiculed more than anything for just hugging the manager after I'd scored and running to him, and not with the players. But it was the longest wait ever, but also a very special moment for myself. It's what I waited my whole life for. I knew that I could impact that football club because of the football club that I was at, what I'd learned, what I understood, what players had left with me, what managers, what fans had instilled in me. I knew very early on with David Moyes, his discipline. I had the opportunity to play with Duncan Ferguson, Alan Stubbs, Tony Hibbert, 3 massive Evertonians. I can name more, the list can go on, but very early on I earned the respect of those 3. And that counted a lot for that team. When we got each other on side, and Tony Hibbert taught me what it was to be an Evertonian through the time, and I just knew that something could happen. I didn't know how or if it was going to happen, but I knew it was going to be more positive. And we got our first derby win in ages. So the constant theme through my career has been just try. Let's just get us together. Let's form a belief, and with what we've got, if the ingredients can work tactically, technically, and the fundamentals are all correct, it all comes down to the discipline and the attitude for the execution of finishing 4th. And I knew going to that club that they were here, and anything there, even mid-table, was a success. And they were the levels that I could build on to implement myself and introduce myself to the Premier League. Merseyside derby is everything for an Evertonian and a Liverpudlian. They live for that game. They go to work Monday to Friday for their football. They're passionate. And those moments that I had at Anfield, scoring, was the only way that you can make an impact on those fans, my fans and their fans. That's the only way. If you go to battle in any sort of way, the only way you can make an impact is not by talking to the fans or trying to entice them. It's what you do on the pitch, and even at Goodison Park. So it's an opportunity as a player to leave your mark. It's an opportunity to have something that you stand for. But even now, I miss them. That's probably one of the biggest things I miss about football, because it's a time that you can activate the fan in a whole different way. It takes them to another world that they live, and they hold on to this, not weeks, not months. They hold on to it near enough forever. Favourite Liverpool players to play against in Merseyside derbies, without a doubt, Steven Gerrard. I used to look for his name straight away. If you want any bigger character that has an influence through actions and not talking, it's him. 1 tackle, 1 pass, 1 shot, 1 run, their behaviours. They're behaviours that become infectious on players, and there's something that there's not many players that I would say that have that impact within a game. The other player I'd look for is Jamie Carragher, because he'll be the first one that I would target to have a meeting with on the pitch when the ball comes in, second ball into the body, and expect contact or expect, a coming together, because if you can win those sorts of battles with characters like that, it does have effect on their fans, because he is definitely one of the biggest leaders for that club, is Steven Gerrard. And probably one of the best players to watch, Xabi Alonso. Short, long. It was like you had the ball on a string with the way he passes. So big influential sort of players. But two, for me, is Steven Gerrard and Jamie Carragher. David Moyes has a very stern character, strong, tall, and not intimidating, but just when he comes into the room, you know he's there. He cares about the players, even though sometimes he doesn't show it. He cares about the group, but I think one of the best things that he done for the football club was build a team around the club's identity, what it meant to play for the club, what it meant to the fans. He's one of the best I've worked with, because not just about the football, it's about the family side. You know, he always asked how my family was. He always asked how I was mentally. And he always knew how to push my buttons. You know, he's not someone that would compliment me a lot, but would give me constructive criticism that will create a spark to hit a nerve to try and do better, because I know that I can give him more. And he could get everything out of a player, which, you know, signing Mikel Arteta, Stephen Pienaar, Leighton Baines, Jagielka, Phil Neville, Fellaini. The list can go on. And he was very good at putting good characters and good people together and giving us responsibility within that group to help him on and off the pitch, but very detailed, very detailed. Like, you know, now wanting to become a coach and transitioning into learning how to be a coach, the attributes that I'll never forget with him was analysis, was being in that media room for hours, was being on the pitch on a Friday or Thursday. And we joke about it now, having to get wet tops and put them on because we're walking through set plays. And we knew where we had to stand on set plays, arm width apart, body shape a little bit open, and then looking to where we were going to head it and how we were going to break on transition from a corner. The importance of defence. But the detail that he had, he doesn't get a lot of credit for. And I don't think that he'd really ask for it, because with what we had to finish fourth, he made the players, all these players that he had, he made better players. They went on and had amazing moves and resurrected some of their careers. Who knows, you know, if we had, you know, could sign, you know, more players or spend loads of money, what it would be like. I think when you talk about Mikel and Phil into coaching, different coaches altogether, different personalities, and also different styles to a certain degree, different sorts of leaders. You know, Mikel's quiet, introverted, only speaks when there's something important to say. The analysis side of what he does and the detail in behind is on a different planet. And you look at Phil Neville, it's actions, it's voice, it's pointing, it's organising, it's more collective. I think for where Mikel's sitting now as a coach, his character, I think he's going to be very successful. And I know as a close friend, not because we played together and I'm a fan, I know because of being in the same changing room as him, being on the same pitch. Things that don't matter to other players or to other people, whether it's in a training session or whether it's in a video or whether it's on paper, the hours is the most important thing, is what you put into anything. And one of the biggest things he said to me that will never leave me is that what you put in is what you'll get back when you want to become a coach. And hence, you know, the level that I'm putting behind learning, understanding the educational side, the technical, the tactical, the grassroots, and being within academy. But I can only sit from afar and watch him and know that the hours he's putting in and the work rate is second to none. The goal, first ever goal for Australia in a World Cup. At the time, I didn't know that that was the case, but that's another stage. It's another moment that I knew coming off the bench, that you look the night before, the analysis, you learn about the centre backs. You know who the left back is, you know who the right back is, you know who's weaker. I knew everything about Japan. I knew set plays, where I was going to run. I knew the detail about individuals. And I think for me, that game will always be so special because if you win, you know, it sets up the tournament. If you lose, and we were 1-0 down, then knowing you're playing Brazil and Croatia, you're up against it. And Japan was the most winnable game of that group. So I'd scored, you know, a goal, opportunistic, you know, went through the legs, but the second one that were hit off both posts. You know, I don't shoot from outside the 18-yard box often, and when I hit it, it's just momentum. It was just feeling. It was instinct, and caught the keeper cold. And that was the start of, you know, the journey of a World Cup for me in Australia. Against Croatia, it had everything in it. You know, the way we conceded the goal was so soft. Then having to chase the game. We actually had, you know, Australian Croatians playing on the other team, Simonic. We have, you know, part Croatian players playing in our team. We have the big Croatian population in Australia. So it was all fused into passion. The fans were buzzing. But I think it was just the emotions of what it meant for both teams. And for us, we needed a result, and we knew we could do it. You know, we had Mark Schwarzer, who was playing most of the games, and Gus Hiddink decides to start Zeljko Kalac. You know, the background, don't know whether it was the mindset, because he has a Croatian background. And when we'd scored late on, the celebrations, we knew that 35 years not qualifying for a World Cup since our last one, to being going through the group stages, is unheard of. But the players that we had, the characters, we all played in some of the biggest leagues in the world. We knew we had that opportunity to do something special. I think at the time it was hot. They had 10 men. I think we had a lot of momentum in that game. Gus Hiddink was dithering with making a sub. He delayed it, whether that was something tactically that was a smart thing or an adverse thing. But Lady Luck wasn't on our side, you know, from the penalty. When you look at the situation, 50% will say it's a penalty, 50% will say it's not a penalty. When I look at the game, the sub was a big moment that possibly that could have happened to take us, you know, with fresher legs and to try and attack. But we were going into extra time after that with the advantage. So it's just what could have been. But for me, I've never looked back. It was meant to be, and they went on to win the World Cup. And I know that we had an opportunity there that could have been really special, but I suppose Lady Luck wasn't with us. We lost to the winners, but at the same time, you have all these cycles as a player, and playing for 23 years, the emotions that you go through. You look at it now, and, you know, sitting here, I just look at it now and I look at the situations with not as much as emotion as at the time, and I just think it wasn't meant to be. Whereas at the time I was upset, I was, you know, distraught and thinking, you know, what could have been, but wasn't meant to be. To leave Everton, it was the hardest thing I ever done as a footballer. But at the same time, You've got to know when the right time is. You've got to understand your body. And one thing that was really important to me was my family, my health, and also playing for Australia. If I'd stayed at Everton much longer, you know, I had over 500 games under my belt at 32. That's without international games. I had aspirations of playing in more World Cups and more Asia Cups. Everton had a level that you had to keep at within games and standards of how far you run, the high intensity, and I could see that with international work and club work that it's impossible. And mathematically, it couldn't work that I could keep the levels, and I moved to New York. And it was a fresh start for my family. New York Red Bulls, great place to live. MLS, amazing. Thierry Henry, Rafa Marquez, Juninho Pernambucano. And it also allowed me to take less stress on the body, but then also they knew that I wanted to continue with Australia. And it was a no-brainer. And so really when I look at it, I learned about the commercial world, the business world, and I was like, wow. It was like my career was just starting all over again with those sorts of moves. And then it was easy. It was easy, it was fun, it was rejuvenating. It was sad to leave Everton, but then at the same time, you know, Everton will always kick on and do well. And it was hard to say goodbye to David Moyes and the family there. I think when I made the tactical decision to go to different countries around the world, I looked at the platform of playing for the national team, being in the Asian group, going to China, going to India, going back to Australia, different languages, different emotions, different attitudes. It was more a development league. It was more about helping, using my leadership roles and being a passive coach within that group, which taught me a hell of a lot because I could lean on the managers that were there in those countries and also help implement things that I thought that'll help us move up the league when we're in China, Shanghai Shenhua, to get to another final, Chinese Cup, massive cup that we lost in the end, unfortunately. Things that, you know, they thought that couldn't happen. In India, the professionalism, the levels of what's expected, and also going back to Melbourne, being a part of winning their first ever trophy in the FFA Cup and the aspirations that that club had with the big backers behind them. So I was always passively a coach. I was always passively because I was tactically within this setup, thinking about the mindset that maybe one day I want to be a coach, maybe, not 100%. And now going into retirement, it has taken plenty of processes to sit where I am today to talk about the potential to want to cross the line and step over, and I'm loving it. But I'm loving it because I'm starting in an academy. I'm starting putting out the cones, moving the goals, session planning, 6-8 hour days, but blocking it in 2-3 week periods that I'll block, you know, full work at Everton with the academy and then take 2 weeks off to think and take a breath and then see whether I miss it, see whether I need it, and then go back into it and now complete my A license. So I think I have the ingredients, but as a coach, I just listen and I educate myself with people that are much better than me and surround myself with people that know a lot more than me when it comes to that line of work.